suffering children.
Oh my God.
Struggling to survive.
I have a youth here breaking windows, all bloody.
In a system that's supposed to save them.
They can come from a nightmare into a house of horror.
A year-long turn-to-terror investigation into one suburban foster school. How can you say that your campus is safe right now? Expands to expose a wider, even more urgent breakdown in the mental health system charged with upholding the well-being of 22 million people.
So this is an issue for every residential treatment center across New York State.
Today,
I really just want justice.
I'm supposed to have a 24-year-old son right now, and I don't.
The consequences of failure.
I'm currently serving 30 to life for a double homicide.
And the data that proves thousands of vulnerable children remain at risk. When home hurt. Blim reporting from a more than century-old residential treatment center for troubled children, where troubling behavior is nothing new. But lately, we noticed a dramatic spike in violence and erratic outbursts on and off campus, so we decided to investigate. And what we discovered was a significant flaw in New York's statewide mental health protocols, resulting in the most vulnerable children being sent to live at centers ill-equipped, understaffed, and in some cases, even unlicensed to treat them. Tucked away in the well-manicured Westchester town of Mount Pleasant, the Cottage School sits on a more than 150-acre sprawling campus with Ivy League elegance on the outside.
You have a big green square full of grass. You have nice trees. Now, it sounds like a pretty picture, right?
But inside,
not everything looks as what it seems. It was always fighting.
Fearful of retaliation, this former student agreed to share her story, but not her identity. So let's call her Jane.
I had to do stuff that I didn't want to basically protect myself.
Up until 2018, Jane was one of the 160 children, mostly from New York City, Westchester, and Long Island, removed from their families and placed by family courts or government agencies at the Residential Treatment Center, run by nonprofit JCCA, with public and private funding. It was the nation's first cottage-style orphanage, set up with the mission to care for troubled boys and girls facing abuse, neglect, complex trauma, or in Jane's case, all of the above.
My story is kind of chaotic. Like, I have to deal with a lot of physical abuse.
But Jane says her life here was even more unpredictable and dangerous than the one she was so desperate to escape.
People just used to fight for little things, like for clothes or for money or for drugs. We had 2 riots where everybody on campus just went crazy, people stabbing people. I saw people damaging property, damaging cars.
Months later, she says another experience left her with wounds that have yet to heal.
This is a tattoo for my friend Michael Berardino. He's always with me,
What happened to him?
He was complaining that he wasn't feeling good, and the infirmary kept telling him, you're fine, just go lay down in your cottage, take this Tylenol.
Michael was my 15-year-old son. It's beyond heartbreak. I'm supposed to have a 24-year-old son right now, and I don't. I don't. I miss him every day. 100%. It was their fault. All 5 of those days that my son went to the infirmary, the words that were reiterated to him were, stop playing around, nothing's wrong with you, go back to your cottage.
Unfortunately, Michael's tragedy is just one example of many. A meltdown this week at a school for troubled kids in Mount Pleasant is sparking outcry.
More than 50 students got into a fight. 11 students were arrested.
Our team has been documenting troubling outbursts,
It all comes after 2 vicious sex attacks.
At the cottage school,
They were gonna kill me that night.
dating back more than 2 decades.
12-year-old boy allegedly sexually assaulted another 12-year-old.
And tracking them with our own database. It's not only the violence at these group homes that's got them so upset, which is how we spotted a spike in incidents in recent years,
Trespassing and fights.
involving increasingly erratic behavior.
Get out of my way!
Like this bizarre encounter all caught on camera.
I'm calling the police!
A student standing shirtless, blocking a local roadway, pleads with a passing driver to end his life. The month before, this disturbed teenager snuck into someone's backyard
It looks like it's him again, sitting on the side on a rock.
and bit the head off a live chicken right in front of a child.
He strangled it and then was chewing on the head when the police officers came.
There was also this vicious assault of a 15-year-old girl on campus, videotaped by her roommate and allegedly witnessed by a staff member.
She called me from the hospital that morning. They didn't even call me.
Concern shared by this former teacher who reached out to my team last year after working at the cottage school for 15 years.
I didn't know where to turn, and then I said, where else to turn? Turn to Tara. We have students getting hurt, hurting each other. They're in major danger. There's sexual abuse. Things are not being reported.
We took her allegations straight to the man in charge,
And my name is Ron Richter.
who had a surprising response we don't normally hear in a Turn to Tara investigation.
I wouldn't deny that there are times when our staff isn't right on top of the kids.
But first, the dramatic data we also asked him to respond to. Through a public records request, the Turn to Tara team obtained police reports dating back a decade. The data shows officers responded to the campus 779 times last year, a more than 20% increase from the year before, and almost 45% increase from a decade ago. In 2023, those calls included everything from missing persons, vandalism, and violent fights to sexual crimes and attempted suicides.
I fear for staff up there, and I fear for the kids that are on campus.
Mount Pleasant Police Chief Paul Oliva told us the constant volatility is also a significant drain on the town's police and ambulance services, with multiple emergency calls almost daily.
It's a significant use of our resources.
Which is why he says he joined a group of town leaders
And our fear is that we're going to have an escalation.
demanding the school's permanent closure.
We've had enough. We won't have this anymore.
I think the system has failed these kids.
The local police chief here, countless elected officials, they want this school shut down. What is your response to that?
So I appreciate their concerns. We have been here since about 1911, and so JCCA is committed to continue to provide services to young people who are appropriate for our program. So my response is that we have no intention of closing down.
JCCA CEO Ron Richter invited us to campus for the first time to directly address the concerns.
You don't want anybody to get injured while they're in your care.
Concerns he blames on state officials who started placing more severely mentally ill children at not only the cottage school,
This is not unique to us.
but similar treatment centers all across New York. A direct response, he says, to the state cutting the supply of pediatric psychiatric beds nearly in half over the past decade. Describe some of the mental illnesses that we're talking about here.
We have kids that have schizophrenia, bipolar disorder. We've had suicidality.
But legally, if a troubled child acts out, Richter says their hands are tied because, unlike a mental health facility, his staff is not allowed to forcefully restrain a student or even stop them from leaving campus.
We are not, by state regulation, permitted to lock doors. We're not licensed to give injectables.
3 years ago, JCCA formally asked the Office of Children and Family Services to give them authorization to change that, but they're still waiting for a decision.
Every kid that's here, a New York State judge has determined they can't live at home. So I feel very strongly that we owe these kids sort of the highest kind of quality care. We're not doing that. And I don't see New York quickly enough advancing solutions.
So what you just told me is that the current system and the state of New York is failing these children as a result of these policies.
I think that there are some kids that we are failing. I don't, I have to say, I think 90% of the kids who are at JCCA are being served well.
We reached out to OCFS to see what they're doing to close this urgent mental health gap. The statement they sent in response reads in part, OCFS is reviewing proposed intensive service program models that would bolster the existing continuum of congregate care program models. But that's cold comfort to Jane.
I want people to wake up. I feel like they do a lot more damage than help people.
People like Jose Colon, who says he went from being a bullied and scared 12-year-old kid at the cottage school to a leader of 3,000 gang members.
But I was in control of all of them.
Still ahead. We head behind bars to hear how his time spent here started him on the path to prison. From the bucolic cottages at the nation's oldest residential home for orphan children, to the foreboding walls and barbed wire at the big house, we are inside one of America's most notorious maximum security prisons to speak with someone who says he fell through the cracks of New York's mental health system.
My name is Jose Colon. My DIN number is 02 Apple 4378.
Jose is a former high-ranking leader of the notorious Latin King Street Gang.
I was one of the ones that called the shots.
Who admits to committing unthinkable crimes.
I'm currently serving 30 to life for a double homicide.
In 1998, Jose says 3,000 gang members ages 15 to 19 were under his command.
I was in control of all of them.
Many of those so-called soldiers reportedly fellow classmates at the Pleasantville Cottage School.
That's one of the main reasons why I'm so geared towards these kids, because I know that that's the breeding ground.
He knows because he lived it. A judge sent the Bronx native to live at the Center for Abused and Neglected Children in Westchester County at age 12.
So I was removed from home at an early age. It wasn't easy being placed in a cottage with 14 kids and having to share that space.
And so at one point you decide to join a gang.
Deciding to join a gang, I believe, had more to do with kind of like feeling isolated, feeling by myself. Being removed from my home and placed into this Pleasantville foster care. There was a culture amongst the kids. And as a kid, you're impressionable. You want to be able to fit in with the in crowd. And because the campus is approximately 200, 300 something kids, and this is what everybody's doing, you actually fall victim to that peer pressure.
So gang life was prolific?
Well, in this particular facility, yes.
Did you get into a lot of fights?
Yes.
When was the first time you held a gun?
In 1998.
1 year later.
And police have reportedly made an arrest tonight.
Jose fired his weapon during a burglary at a Bronx apartment building.
They're only teenagers, but they face some very grown-up trouble.
Killing an elderly couple.
I kicked the door open and just pulled the trigger.
That was heartless. The bodies of Carlos and Antonia Pena discovered by their 13-year-old foster child.
There's an overwhelming feeling of remorse that I feel when I think about it. Even when the image is in my head, because I have a daughter now.
A daughter who is now the same age Colon was when he was placed at a residential treatment center. He's talking to us now to make sure she and any other children don't follow his path. And it starts with the state investing early to prevent spending on prison later on.
I wanted to share my story with you because I believe that there's somebody out there who's probably dealing with the same thing. They still want to be that bigger person. They're still looking for those guns, those weapons, those knives that make them want to feel superior or be somebody who they might think they want to be now. But in 10 years, it's not the person you want to be.
Unfortunately, Jose's story is a familiar one for students sent to live at the nearly 24 residential treatment centers like the Cottage School across New York, as state officials struggle to keep up with the growing demand for pediatric mental health services.
It's definitely a crisis.
Kathleen Brady-Stepien is the CEO of the Council of Family and Child Caring Agencies, or CAFCA, representing providers similar to JCCA, all grappling with an influx of students with more severe psychiatric needs due to the diminished capacity at more intense residential treatment facilities across the state, which went from having 550 beds in 2012 to just 250 today.
Under the prior governor, Governor Cuomo, the state undertook an initiative really as a cost savings and to invest in community-based treatment services and supports, which sounds terrific, but we've not seen that be executed.
Brady-Stepien described the consequences as severe and dangerous in a scathing letter to Governor Hochul last year, warning that children with complex behavioral health needs are falling through the cracks.
Our facilities in residential foster care were not designed to support those needs. They're not licensed, they're not funded. So we really need the state support and action.
Kaylee Zaloga, who runs the New York State Coalition for Children's Behavioral Health, agrees young lives are on the line.
And so kids are ending up cycling in and out of emergency rooms, needing brief acute care just to stay safe. We don't have enough money in the system to provide these services to everyone who needs them.
A crisis, she says, that is disproportionately impacting children of color across the tri-state.
They're overwhelmingly kids of color, kids from poor backgrounds. And yes, it's frustrating because the providers who are trying to serve these children have been asking for quite some time for the additional resources necessary to serve them better.
Now let's talk about mental health.
It's criticism that has not been lost on New York Governor Kathy Hochul, who recently announced a $1 billion multi-year plan that she hopes will help transform the state's troubled mental health care system, a system she admits has suffered due to chronic underinvestment. The plan includes the addition of 200 inpatient psychiatric beds at state-operated facilities and new mental health clinics at schools statewide.
We're going to do something about it once and for all. That's my commitment to New Yorkers.
I think that at least there's an opening now, and there's beginning to be an acknowledgement that some of our kids are really in pain.
The ultimate risk is that kids are not able to reach their potential as happy, thriving members of their communities. We see kids who don't get the mental health care they need are more often going to end up in the criminal justice system.
Kids who turn into adults like Jose Colon.
I feel hurt.
A worst-case example of what can happen.
She's bleeding, bro!
When home hurts.
Yeah, you can't.
Still to come, we'll show you how the crisis extends beyond New York's borders.
It's shocking to me, actually, as a legislator, that the thought would be, let's shut down beds.
And the reason some decision makers are looking next door to Connecticut for possible solutions. Community fury.
They've been terrorizing the neighborhood.
Overloaded emergency responders.
Help us, please.
They got weapons, so I'm gonna need y'all to come up here now.
Broken windows.
She was now violent, emotionally disturbed.
And shattered bones.
It paralyzed him from the neck down.
Those are just some of the grave consequences that advocates say have resulted from residential treatment centers across New York being forced in recent years to take in students whose intense mental health needs far exceed the level of care the centers are licensed to provide. But is the problem isolated to New York, or is it far more widespread across the tri-state? To find out, we caught up with the Connecticut House Chairwoman of the Committee on Children, Liz Linehan.
So what Connecticut did was create more opportunities for beds because we recognize that behavioral health doesn't turn on a dime.
Linehan fought to institute sweeping changes back in March, impacting group homes all across Connecticut. That included adding more staff and providing funding to build 2 intensive treatment centers for children in crisis or who've experienced severe trauma.
And we knew for the safety of our kids that we needed to act
All changes made in the aftermath of troubling allegations of physical abuse and sex trafficking at the Bridge Family Center in Harwinton, which has since been shut down.
The hope and the belief is that this is a one-off.
Linehan is also hoping to deliver better outcomes for at-risk children by increasing the capacity at state-run psychiatric residential treatment facilities, known as RTFs, which, as we explained, is not what's been happening in New York in recent years.
New York's holistic approach included closing down beds. That's not a holistic approach. It's shocking to me, actually, as a legislator, that the thought would be, let's shut down beds so we can help more kids. That makes zero sense.
Meantime, a newly released report by the Children's Advocacy Institute assigned the state of New Jersey an F grade for failing to protect federal benefits intended for foster youth. But back in January, lawmakers passed a new law revising New Jersey's Foster Youth Bill of Rights, which requires children to be notified of their benefits, which advocates say is a step in the right direction, but leaves much work still ahead. So now what? The students, parents, teachers, school leaders, and advocates you've just heard from all hope their voices will lead to more urgent conversations, because unless changes are made, they say, students will continue to fall through the cracks. I'm